man in Ohio makes $240,000 a year. He has a nice truck, a 4-bedroom house, 2 kids in private school, and on the 15th of every month, before rent, before groceries, before anything else, he is already out of money. Not poor, not lazy, not stupid, just broke. In a very expensive, very convincing costume. This is not a story about bad luck. It's a story about bad math. And the strange part is nobody ever sat this man down and taught him the math. Nobody sits any of us down. We get taught the quadratic formula. We do not get taught what a credit card actually costs. We memorize the periodic table. Nobody memorizes what compound interest does to a paycheck over 30 years. So people improvise. They guess. They copy what their parents did or what looks impressive online, and they call that a financial plan. Here's the uncomfortable part. The system doesn't just fail to teach you this by accident. It's mildly profitable for a lot of very large institutions if you never learn it. A confused customer is a loyal customer. Today we're taking that education back. 5 rules. Not tips, not hacks, rules, the kind that don't care about your feelings and don't bend for your excuses. Understand them and you're playing a completely different game than most people around you. Ignore them and you can out-earn 90% of the country and still end up like the man in Ohio. Let's start with the one that ruins the illusion first. Rule number 1. Your paycheck is not your money. It's a hallway. Money enters your account, and if you don't give it a job immediately, it walks straight through you and out the other side. This sounds almost too simple to matter. It matters more than almost anything else on this list. Here's the mechanism. Every time money hits your checking account, there's a queue of people waiting to take a cut before you even notice. It left, rent, subscriptions you forgot about. That coffee that's technically $4 but somehow becomes $7 with tax and tip. None of these transactions feel dangerous individually. That's the whole trick. Nothing about spending $11 on lunch feels like a decision that matters. But added up, the average American spends over $3,000 a year on food they didn't cook themselves. Not steak dinners, just the friction of convenience, one small purchase at a time. Multiply that by a working life of 40 years invested instead of spent, and you're not talking about lunch anymore. You're talking about a house, paid in cash. This is why pay yourself first isn't a slogan for a poster. It's a defense mechanism. The rule is simple. The moment money arrives, a fixed percentage leaves immediately into savings or investing before your brain gets a vote. Not what's left over at the end of the month. There is never anything left over at the end of the month. That's not a coincidence. That's a design flaw in how humans experience money. We adjust our spending to match whatever's available almost perfectly almost every time. Economists have a name for it. Normal. People just call it living paycheck to paycheck and assume it's about income. It's usually not about income. The man in Ohio proved that. Which brings us to rule number 2, and this one has a public relations problem. Debt has been marketed to you as evil. It isn't. Debt is neutral. A tool. And like most tools, it can build your house or it can take your hand off depending entirely on how you use it. Here's what almost nobody explains clearly. There are 2 completely different species of debt wearing the same costume. One species is debt that buys you an asset, something that's worth more tomorrow than it is today, or that increases your ability to earn. A mortgage on a house in a stable market. A loan for an education that actually leads to higher income. Even certain business loans. This kind of debt is borrowed time. You're paying a small fee to access value now instead of waiting years to save for it. The other species is debt that buys you a feeling. A vacation you couldn't afford. A car that loses value the second you drive it off the lot. A credit card balance from a year you'd rather forget. This debt doesn't build anything. It just moves your future money into your present and charges you rent for the privilege. And the rent is brutal. The average credit card interest rate in the United States sits around 20 to 25% annually. Let That's it for a second. If you owe $5,000 and only make minimum payments, you could pay back that $5,000 almost twice over before it's gone. And it can take close to 2 decades to fully clear. 2 decades for a couch and a few plane tickets. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Credit card. Companies do not want you to pay off your balance. A customer who pays in full every month is, in industry terms, called a deadbeat. That's the actual internal label. The entire business model prefers you slightly behind forever. Not drowning. Drowning customers stop being profitable. Just treading water indefinitely, one payment behind. Comfort. So rule 2 isn't avoid all debt. It's sharper than that. Ask what the debt is actually buying. If it's buying an asset, it might be working for you. If it's buying a feeling, you're renting your own future at 20% interest, and the bank already knows you'll probably pay. Now here's where the stakes start to climb, because rule 3 is the one that makes everything else either matter enormously or barely matter at all. Time is not a soft, poetic concept in finance. It's a multiplier. Brutal, mechanical multiplier that does not care how you feel about starting late. This is compound interest, and here's the version nobody bothers to make vivid. 2 people. Same job, same salary, same investment return of around 10% a year, which is roughly the long-run average of the U.S. stock market. Person A starts investing $200 a month at age 25. Person B waits, gets comfortable, starts the exact same $200 a month at age 35. Only difference, 10 years. By age 65, person A has around $1.3 million. Person B, who invested for 30 years instead of 40, ends up with roughly half of that. Not because they invested less money overall. The gap in what they actually put in is small. The gap in the outcome is enormous. 10 years, 6 figures, gone. Not because of a mistake, because of a delay. This is the part of money that behaves almost nothing like intuition suggests. Our brains are wired for linear thinking. Put in a little, get out a little more. Compound growth doesn't work like that. Flat and unimpressive for years, and then it bends upward violently, almost all at once, usually right around the time most people have already given up and cashed out. Which is why the real enemy in investing was never the market crashing. The real enemy is waiting for the perfect moment to start. There is no perfect moment. There's only the moment you actually begin, and every year after that where the machine either has time to work or doesn't. So if that's the mechanism, steady contribution left alone over time, why does it feel like almost nobody actually does this? Because of rule 4, and this is where hype and reality stop agreeing with each other. Open any finance app, any trading forum, any social feed talking about money, and you'll see the same character over and over. Someone who turned $3,000 into $40,000 in a month. Someone who called a stock before it doubled. Someone whose entire personality is now a chart going up and to the right. Here's the quiet, unglamorous truth underneath that noise. The wealthiest, most consistent investors in history are almost never the loudest ones online. Warren Buffett built the overwhelming majority of his fortune after age 50. Not through a genius trade, through decades of unremarkable, repeated, boring decisions that compounded into something extraordinary. There's no thumbnail for that. Nobody. Screenshots. I didn't touch my index fund for 11 years and gets 10 million views. Meanwhile, the data on active trading is almost comically consistent. Study after study on individual retail investors finds the same pattern. The more frequently people trade trying to time the perfect entry and exit, the worse their actual returns tend to be compared to simply holding a broad market investment and doing nothing. Doing nothing statistically outperforms most people trying very hard. There's a quiet irony sitting right in the middle of this. The financial content that gets the most attention is almost never the financial behavior that actually builds wealth. Excitement and long-term returns tend to move in opposite directions. If a strategy is boring enough to make you check your phone, it's probably working. If it's exciting enough to make you refresh constantly, it's probably not. This isn't an accusation against any one person chasing a hot stock. It's a pattern. And patterns are expensive when you're the one funding them. Which leads to the last rule, and it's the one most people never even think to ask because the entire culture around money is built to make sure you don't. How much is actually enough? Not how much would be nice. Not how much would impress people. Enough. The number where more money stops meaningfully changing your life. There's research on this that surprises almost everyone the first time they hear it. Happiness and life satisfaction tend to rise fairly sharply with income up to a certain point, somewhere in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on the study and the region, covering security, health, reduced stress. Past that point, the curve doesn't reverse. It just goes remarkably flat. More money keeps arriving. The emotional return on it quietly stops. But almost nobody is taught to look for that flattening point. Instead, we're taught to look sideways at the neighbor's car, the coworker's vacation photos, the version of a stranger's life curated for an audience. And sideways comparison has no ceiling. There is always a bigger house, one tax bracket up. Always a nicer version of whatever you just bought, one scroll away. Lifestyle inflation isn't really about the things themselves. It's about a finish line that keeps sliding forward exactly as fast as you approach it. Here's the quietly absurd part. A person earning $200,000 a year who's chasing a lifestyle built for someone earning $500,000 isn't wealthy. They're just running the treadmill at a higher speed. The man in Ohio from the start of this video was never behind because of his salary. He was behind because his target kept moving faster than his income could catch it. Knowing your number, the actual figure where you'd feel secure, not impressive, secure, is what turns money from an endless chase into a tool with a defined purpose. Without that number, no amount of income is ever enough because enough was never actually the goal. Being ahead of someone else was. So take these 5 rules together and something a little unsettling becomes visible. Give your money a job the second it arrives, or it disappears without your permission. Understand exactly what your debt is buying before it buys years of your future. Start the compounding machine as early as possible because time does more of the work than any clever decision ever will. Ignore the loudest voices in finance because the ones building real wealth are almost always the quietest. And define what enough actually looks like before someone else's life defines it for you. None of these require a finance degree. None of them require timing, the market, or picking the right stock, or knowing something nobody else knows. That's precisely why they work and precisely why they're so easy to ignore. They're not exciting enough to feel like progress. While you're doing them, here's the question worth sitting with after this ends. Somewhere between the paycheck hallway, the debt disguised as opportunity, and the finish line that keeps sliding forward, how much of your financial life right now is actually a decision you made, and how much of it is a system quietly making the decision for you? Because the man in Ohio never thought he was choosing to be broke. He just never noticed he'd stopped choosing at all.